And Christine is going to talk about social strategies for sales leaders. And I'm very eager to learn from her because she's a master at that. Please give her a big hand. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerhard. This has been an incredible 2 days. It's been an incredible 2 days of learning and connecting and thought leadership and actionable content. And I guess all of that aside, this is a really interesting time to be presenting because usually around this time, maybe kind of bear with me, raise your hand above your head if I'm not the only one here who feels like their brain on the best of things is a little bit full and at the worst is totally fried. So where are your brains at? Somewhere between full and fried. And the other thing that tends to happen at this time of the day at conferences is, again, at best, maybe mild anxiety, and at the worst, incredible frustration, going back to the office and thinking, how am I going to action out even a third of the notes that I've taken in the past 2 days? Anybody else feel that way? Pages and pages of notes, and you're going back to your organization and figuring out, what do I do with this? So as I thought about this presentation and what it is that we wanted to share with you, one of the things that I think I can contribute and how I think I can add value is to take what I've heard in the past 2 days and to basically put into 4 sort of value propositions social business, the kinds of conversations that we can be thinking about as we're driving home at the end of the evening. In my case, as I'm flying back to Canada, on your way to work tomorrow morning, everything that we've heard into sort of 4 buckets. The kinds of conversations that you can have with your employees and your team tomorrow. And the second thing that I think I can do is I think I can take you from conceptualizing what social business is all about to actually figuring out what's one methodology that I can use starting tomorrow with my teams or with the whole organization to try and actually move to the more operational side of things. How do I actually become a more social business? Does that feel okay? Go. Over the past couple of days, we've heard a number of different really, really valuable and interesting stats. And there's a very small document, 180-page white paper that McKinsey Global Institute published. If anybody's interested in PDF, I can email it to them. But I pulled 3 stats out of there that sort of encapsulize what I heard in the past couple of days. And the first is, we've talked a lot about the ROI of social business, of becoming a more social business. But the stats in this white paper, what's really interesting, is 90% is out of the percentage of companies that are using social business and transforming to becoming more social business, 90% seeing some value from that. And so that's pretty high. And over the past couple of days, we've heard varying degrees of that. But if you dig into this white paper, it's somewhere around 90%. And the other thing I find really interesting in this white paper is as high as that number is, the cool statistic is you actually start looking at the incremental value derived from increased communication, engagement, and collaboration on the enterprise inside, behind the firewall, being almost double that. And so for me, from an HR background, it's really interesting because sort of 20 years into my career, I've spent equal time in retail sales and operations and management and HR. So it's really interesting because I firmly believe that the place that we're at, this transition between conceptualizing social business and operationalizing it, is as far-reaching in its people impact in our workplaces as it is in our business impact with our customers. So this is really interesting to me, this idea of 2 times the value. And then this other number, $1.3 trillion perceived annual value that could be unlocked leveraging social technology and social business. And that number is a big number, it's conceptual, but think about the past couple of days, the kinds of stats that have been thrown out. I think Andres, it was yesterday, was talking about every one of our teams, every one of our businesses has a 10% upside if we start to do things a little bit differently. What does that look like in your own teams? If you've ever read the book, The Loyalty Effect, there's an interesting kind of correlation. A 5% increase in your customer retention is going to lead somewhere to 25 to 100% at your bottom line. That's a pretty interesting statistic. And yesterday, in Gerhardt's opening speech, he talked about Sungard and this $4 million investment in social business technology for their reps, leading to $100 million at the top line. So as you start to think about these 4 sort of value propositions that I'm going to talk about, I want you to think about them in the concept of your own team. What is the upside of me potentially thinking or doing something differently? And so here are the 4 value propositions. The first one, employees are your brand. For better or for worse, whether they're hijacking your brand, if anybody's ever gone to the hashtag I hate my job, it's pretty cool. There's just a constant stream of people. You might notice maybe one of your employees is even on there. Constant stream of people just complaining about their jobs. And it's so interesting because then you go to their profile and go, that was a really funny tweet. And then you go to their profile and you see this little descriptor, and then you find out where they work. And then you have this funny little, disclaimer on the bottom saying, my tweets are my own. They're not your own. It says right there that you work for company XYZ. So yes, you said the tweet, but I get to decide how I interpret that. So employees are your brand. When I think about the companies that I've met in the past couple of days here, and whether that's Heinz Marketing, whether that's even Sales Point 2 Conference, whether that's Synergy, whether that's Nimble, all of these companies that I've been introduced to, largely how I feel to date about my interactions with that company and how I feel about the brand is largely based on my virtual and in real life interactions with Matt and Larissa and Lisa and Jason from Synergy and all the other people. And I've had great interactions, by the way, with all of them, so I feel very strongly about your brands. But if the opposite had happened, I might feel differently. And so as you think about your teams, and as you think about all of us sort of digital immigrants out there trying to figure this stuff out, trying to navigate these waters and learn about sort of these social tools, what's the opportunity and what's the risk if as leaders we're not paying attention to this? Great conversation to start. The second is finding and leveraging existing sales knowledge. Really good leaders today, and all of you in this room are really great leaders just by being here and wanting to be on the cutting, relevant edge of all of this. But really good leaders today spend a lot of time thinking about how do I organize and tag and help the flow of knowledge in my organization so that the right people on my team have the tools that they need and the information and the accuracy when they need it, how they need it, so that they can better serve the customer. I think it was Lou Platt about 15 years ago said a quote that's sort of started a whole knowledge management movement. If HP only knew what HP knew. And I think the opportunity for the leaders that really understand what social businesses feel like on the inside. It's actually not just about organizing the information and facilitating the flow. It's about tapping into understanding the diversity, the possibilities, the expertise that exists everywhere in your organization, and what it is that you can create that doesn't exist today. So it's one thing to organize what is. It's another thing to start being able to predict things that you wouldn't have been able to predict because you're breaking down the silos and tapping into the collective wisdom. So I think that's kind of neat. The third value proposition, and we heard probably this the most in the past couple of days, but this whole idea of be where your customers are. We know that the buying journey is changing. We know that people have multiple digital touch points at different points of their journey. How are we organizing ourselves on the inside to be able to meet our customers where they're hanging out, where they're learning, where they're debating, where they're complaining, where they're researching? Think of our own buying behavior. There's a shipping company called Maersk, really big shipping company, and one of the things that I really love about their philosophy with their sales leaders is they think of each one of their sales leaders as thought leaders. That's pretty cool. I'm not just a sales rep. I'm a thought leader. I'm a thought leader creating content and forwarding knowledge and growing knowledge, not just about Maersk, but about my industry. What would it look like to have a sales team full of people who are thought leaders, not just about your company, but about the industry? Jeffrey talked about this morning. Other people talked about it yesterday, this whole foundation of trust. In a trust economy, who do we trust? We trust people who help us grow, who help us learn, who help us access knowledge, who help us build relationships. What would it look like for us to think differently and be where our customers are? And fourth, this whole idea of speed and agility, and Jeffrey talked about this morning, this acronym FAST. If social media and sort of our buying journey, if maybe there's an opportunity more on the front end of the prospecting and the researching and the building of the relationship and the identifying prospects, maybe that's where it's best used. But how are we becoming more agile? Because the digital IQ of our sales force and how our processes and our people and our technology on the back end of the firewall, behind the firewall, is allowing us to be more agile. So if I'm John and I work in the web conferencing vertical, for example, and maybe I attended Matt's course or Matt's session yesterday, and one of the things on my 100 things on my to-do list that Matt has, the most productive human being I think I've met, is to be checking my keywords and my alerts for certain things that make sense in my business. And so maybe I'm looking for keywords around web conferencing and I see a tweet, something about my web conferencing sucks. And I'm able to click on that link and I'm able to see it's a corporate account and I'm able to find the phone number and I pick up the phone. And other than amazement on the other side and maybe a little bit of shock that someone was paying attention and listening, wouldn't it be interesting if that all of a sudden got me a different kind of conversation? So what is that sales efficiency? And so with those four business value, those value propositions, I want you to think about those when you go back to your teams and when people ask you, what did I learn in the past 2 days? What do I know differently now that I didn't know yesterday? All of that, if it stays in your head, is no good. What are the kinds of conversations you're going to have with the people at your boardroom table, people in your office, people virtually, that are going to have further those conversations? So I wanted to, at this point, I wanted to introduce you for the first time, and actually no one has seen this before because this is brand new, this is launching today, literally, is a methodology which comes from experience. It's not theory, it comes from experience, and it's a collaboration from Enterprise Strategies and an organization out of the UK called Stop Think Social. And it's really an experiential kind of process that whether you're a small team or a big organization, this is the methodology, if you follow the methodology, that is going to help you transform into becoming a more social business. This isn't about doing more social. This is about becoming more social. So I wanted to share that with you. The first step in the methodology is culture. So just by a show of hands, has anybody ever been on the receiving end of some kind of failed launch initiative or change management initiative in your organization? Something that kind of got launched? Anybody? Only one? Okay, that's more like it. Anybody who's ever had a corporate office and remote satellites? Anybody who's had HR come in? Anybody who's had, you can insert department that you like, HR, finance, marketing, you know, and all the rest. And that feeling of, they don't know my business. They don't know how this works. This is great in an office, but this doesn't feel right. One of the things that people miss so often is understanding that there is no one magic bullet. If you don't get a clear understanding of what you're starting from the culture of your workplace, and we talked so much about culture in the past 2 days, if you're going to change mindset, you have to understand what is making up the mindset in the first place. And so this whole idea of cultivating a change of sales mindset. If we're moving towards certain behaviors, then all of a sudden as leaders, if you're starting to see new behaviors, think about what we want to recognize and what we want to reward and what we want to not punish. So if you're moving to a place where you're saying, hey, you know what, I want you to tap into the collective wisdom and I want you to use our social intranet in a different way, and I want you to think differently. Well, if the guy comes back from a meeting with a client and the client had some concerns and the person goes to the social intranet and starts crowdsourcing maybe some ideas or some solutions or something along those effects, you can't reprimand them for not going, keeping you in the loop or going through the traditional methods. And so as you drive home tonight, start thinking about what would be the words that you would put to your culture. Andres talked yesterday about, competitive versus cooperative. Start thinking about those small little things. We talked about yesterday, do you force rank? Do you make that public? Do you make public only the people in your President's Club? When we talked about with Jason, with the Ignite app, his theory was, well, maybe you only publish the 3 people above you and the 3 people below you. How do we reward? How do we have conversations? How do we come up with ideas in our team meetings? How do we cull ideas? How do we deal with feedback? How do we compensate? We talked yesterday about compensation. Are we compensating by geography, by team, by individual? Are we rewarding the behavior? Are we rewarding the results? All of those things are informing you as to what your culture currently is. And if you don't have a clear sense of that, then your initiatives are going to fail. We talked about hook. Jeffrey talked about this morning that maybe provocative sentence or the words that come out of your mouth that make someone lean in a little bit more. And by the way, that 8 seconds of human, sort of the attention span of humans that we're at right now, I don't know if you know this, but 7 seconds is the attention span of a goldfish. So somewhere between goldfish and human, we're dealing with a very small opportunity for us to be able to hook people into wanting to know more. Teresa talked about, where's Teresa? Teresa talked about it in her session as well. How do we identify the individuals and the sales team benefits? Well, the first thing is understanding what their pain points are. Try and experiment. Try and go back to your offices tomorrow and try and get super excited. Say, you know what? I was at this phenomenal conference in the past couple of days, and I've signed up for 5 new platforms, social technology platforms that we're all going to start using tomorrow because they're totally going to help our business. And then duck. But what if you went to the office tomorrow and sat your team down and had conversations that matter? Conversations like, hey, we were having a conversation in the past couple of days that the average salesperson is spending 2 to 3 hours a day looking for information or tools or data to be able to do a better job. Where are we at in that? What if we could reduce our email by 80%? What would we do with that time? How would we do differently? If starting from the place of understanding their pain points, which could be as varied as accuracy of data or speed, it could be something to do with life and work balance, it could be quotas, you don't know what those pain points are until you ask. And so once you know what those pain points are in the context of your culture, you're able to have better conversation around what is that hook, what is that emotional connection that's going to convince them that making the effort to move is going to make a difference. And the third thing is helping them visualize what success looks and feels like. I don't know about you, but one of the things that I think we miss doing as leaders is constantly reminding people what success looks and feels like. If you think of vision or visualize, it comes from the Latin word videre, which is to see. And often, however you do that, visually or on a whiteboard or however you're able to paint that picture, this is what it's going to feel like to work differently. This is what it's going to look like when we're not in all these silos. This is what it might feel like to be amping up our speed and going faster. Once I can see what that looks and feels like, I can kind of voice my objections, my fears, my anxieties around it, but you've got me in such a better place than if you just shove the change initiative down my throat. And then the third is assessment. The end result of what a social business looks and feels like, it doesn't matter what industry, it doesn't matter the size of the company, there's certain characteristics that we can attribute to what a social business looks and feels like. What we can't do is paint a picture and say, everyone's starting from the same place. So having a methodology, and whether that's something that you do yourself or whether you bring in someone externally, enterprise strategies, one of the things, we spend a lot of time on the assessment phase. Because we believe that we understand where we're starting from, we know we want to move, and it actually doesn't matter if we're starting from here or on the social sort of business maturity model, if we're already here and we're just tweaking a few little things, that's okay. It's as equally okay to be starting at the 101 level. But we're going to use a different strategy and a different governance model to decide depending on where we're at. So that assessment piece is kind of critical. Imagine if you asked one of your reps to drive to a customer and kind of have a certain meeting, but you didn't assess their capabilities. Maybe they don't drive. Maybe they don't have a car. So once we have that assessment, once we understand where people are starting from, and understanding that when we do an assessment, we're not scoring them, we're not looking for the score doesn't matter, it's just to give us that baseline. Now all of a sudden, we're in a kind of neat place because we feel like we can start moving. And if you think, most of us operate in this ready, fire, aim mode. This may feel like it takes a bit longer, but depending on the culture of your organization and the organizational culture and a lot of these principles, is there reciprocal trust in the organization? Is there already dynamic collaboration? Is there authentic leadership? Do people understand the ultimate purpose of the organization? Do they understand the ultimate customer? If we're working from a starting point of that, all of this can happen pretty quickly. And so then, this is something that we do very easily from an external sales standpoint. We understand the value of putting a network around us. We understand the value of certain people. We understand the value that the way that we're going to get the contract with the CIO is actually their best bet, once we've done our research, is actually this chief architect officer, design officer in the IT side of things that's been with this guy for the past 3 companies that he's gotten fired for, and he's the guy that if we can actually convince to make the recommendations to move to here, that's going to hold a lot more weight. We do this naturally. We do it in our families. I have a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, and they get that maybe there are certain times where they're going to influence dad more than mom to get what they want. We do it naturally. Inside your organizations, when you're trying to make change happen, who are the people in your network, and maybe they're not even in your network, in your organization, who are the influencers? Who are the early adopters? When something happens, who do people go to in the organization to get the real story? Who are the people who maybe are a little bit more of your heretics, who are a little bit more vocal, who aren't afraid to say what they think? Start identifying who those people are and then pull those in and start from the beginning and figure it out. What is, from their standpoint, their pain points? Why do they want to be involved in something like this? Why do they want to help transform? And then enable them with all the tools and the opportunities that you can to be part of the change process. And once you have that core team, once you have those ambassadors, now all of a sudden the message isn't being pushed from you. You've come from a place of understanding. You've come from a place of authenticity. You've come from a place of understanding that social business, it's not a problem looking for a solution. It's the solution because you've started with pain points. And so if network is more around your informal, kind of organic governance, I suppose, then governance is really around your formal network. How do we create the structure? How do we create the game plan, the roadmap? How do we help people understand the blueprint of how we're going to move forward? So the operating agreement has all sorts of things in it. And again, this doesn't have to be this massive, massive process. But fundamentally, when we start from a place where we've come and we get to this place, if we didn't do this, again, it's the Wild West. It's what we're experiencing. It's why we have platform fatigue. It's why we shut down, because we just go and we just try things. And so having this governance model and having a sense of being able, how are we going to track and report progress? How are we going to check in? What happens when things go sideways? Those are the conversations that are best to have, and we talked about it in the motivational speech with Waldo, is just this whole idea of sit in the chair and practice and figure out what's going to happen when things go sideways before they go sideways. And now we get to the place, finally, we get to the place where the table's set, the knives and the forks and the wine glasses and the water and everything, and now we can eat. Now we get to this place where we've done our due diligence, we've really come from a place of figuring out what it is that we are doing, and now we get to play. Now we get to play, we get to figure it out, we get to change course, we get to report back, but we get to actually try things. And so this whole idea of kind of a maturity model, and whatever our starting point on, we know that we're moving. We're all on this journey, this whole idea of digital immigrants. We're kind of all on a journey together, and your organization might be different than your organization, and it just might look different. The important thing is, even at a team level or organization, is that we're moving. And so you have, defined actions, and you have people responsible. This isn't about one person driving it. This is not about consultants driving things. This is a transformation that's happening. You're helping people transform how they work. Everybody is responsible for that. And then the last thing, the last part in the methodology is something, again, I find that we don't do enough of, is celebrate our successes. Not just celebrate, but help move the story forward. It's a journey, and it's baby steps. But think about how things go viral on the internet. Think about how things get shared. Maybe the big news items get shared, but what are the things that we tend to share on a daily basis? The small little bits of content that inspire, that touch an emotional connection. I think Teresa talked about that as well this morning. How do we create that emotional connection? And there's a number of different ways that we can do that, but as we go, it's almost like planning to be spontaneous. There's a number of different ways we can do that. How do we create that bite-sized content? Maybe it's a testimonial from your VP of Sales in Asia saying something like, this quarter we saw a 80% reduction in our email and a 22% increase in our sales. I'm not sure if they're correlated, but let's keep going. Or maybe we hand out little flip cams to people who are your biggest evangelists on this journey so far, who've actually maybe gone from a place where they really weren't believers in what it is that we're doing, and one thing, one deal, one piece of the process, one bit of information, something happened that shifted them, and we're able to kind of capture in their words what's cool about this new way of working. It could be that you have mini case studies that you're able to capture and put into bite-sized content that other people can share to be able to forward your story. And that's it. The methodology. It's putting a little bit of rigor and a little bit of structure instead of at this place where I feel like most organizations are at, which is, oh my God, we got to do all this stuff and go and try it, and then it doesn't work, or you don't give it the chance, and you wonder why it doesn't work, and you turf it, and you try the next thing. Our staff are tired of it. So with the Changes methodology, it's like sitting down at the restaurant and ordering dessert first. We don't do that. We sit down, take our jacket off, we look at the menu, we get a glass of wine, maybe a second glass of wine, an appetizer. That's it. And so this can be as complex. It can take years, it can take months, it can take weeks. Our gift to you is to just think about this as you drive home. Think about this in the next couple of weeks. Start having conversations about it. The slides you can download them on the enterprisestrategies.com website, and I think I scheduled a tweet right about now where you can link to there and just download this presentation. But if you're interested, if you're the kind of leader who's interested in having sparring partners and starting to think about and rattle around why this works or why it doesn't, or present your ideas or create content as well for a community of other leaders who really also know that the way we work is changing, the relationship that people want to have with their workplace is changing. And social business is as much about what happens behind the firewall as in front. If you're that kind of leader, then it's coming in the fall, but there's actually a community and a platform that's going to be able to help you on your journey wherever you're at. And that's called Social Business on Demand, which again is a collaboration between Enterprise Strategy and Stop Think Social. So pretty neat to be in this place. It's just a phenomenal time, I think, to be a business leader. And I think we have every opportunity to not only create great experiences for our customers, but to also really deepen the connection that employees have with you and with their workplace. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, the next presentation will begin shortly in a couple minutes. Thank you.
Nice job.
Thank you.
Thank you.